Hi, Eric here with 30x40 Design Workshop. Today we're going to be discussing architecture books, and specifically the books that I find most useful and inspiring from my library. But also more broadly, I'll be discussing how you can begin building your architectural library, whether you're an architecture fan, a student, or a professional. Now, this is an edited look at my essential books, the ones I couldn't imagine practicing without. Some are books that inspire, some challenge, some remind me of the fundamentals. Some are thick with theory, others are just favorite monographs, and there's a few reference books thrown in there too. Now, although much of my reading is done digitally nowadays, architecture books are, for me, best consumed in physical form. Not only do I enjoy the ritual of opening the book and smelling the inks, the tactile quality of the page, but I appreciate that you can spread them out on the work table if you need some sort of creative spark, and I'll often grab one from the shelf to illuminate an idea during a client meeting. Analog books remain incredibly useful to my practice in many ways. The books in your architecture library provide context for your work. History, precedent, theory, techniques, best practices, fresh perspectives, and of course, creative stimuli. The ones I return to often are like harmonic frequencies which continue to vibrate and resonate over time, even as my ideology is evolving. Is it a coincidence that some of the most emotive connections to books and architectural writings were forged in architecture school many years ago? You know how they say the music you'll listen to the rest of your life is the music you were into when you were 18? That's how many of these books are for me. So these precise books may not hold the same importance for you, but as a thought exercise, consider what your library currently says about you, your interests and your blind spots or your knowledge gaps, ones you might want to fill in. So let's have a look at my favorites. All the links are in the description below, along with a link to a resource page I created on my site. I broke things down into 6 different themes or threads that my library is built around, and I've winnowed it to 5 books in each thread. First, there's history. Now, this is a respect for history, not in a kitschy kind of way, but in a real wanting to understand the origin things kind of way. This doesn't only mean buildings, but objects, art, and places too. Historical context is vitally important to an architect's work. Nothing we do is without precedent, and this is the Bible on history, a thoroughly researched textbook on architectural history set in the cultural context up through roughly the early 80s. Next, modern architecture, a critical history. My critical regionalist hero, Mr. Frampton, decodes and critiques the architecture of the modern world. It's hard to imagine a more resonant teacher of the history of modern architecture for me. Okay, next up, a field guide to New England barns and farm buildings. There's a real reason why farmers built cupolas on their barns, and it's linked to cow manure. You're curious now, right? The book is filled with gems like this that decipher the humble agricultural buildings we're surrounded by. This is foundational, practical knowledge that guides my own work. Next up is Reading the Forested Landscape and the Granite Landscape. There's something about knowing everything that's shaped a place or what's happening beneath our superficial, often purely visual understanding of the world. These books nurture that for me. Understanding how trees rot, softwoods from the outside in, hardwoods from the inside out, or the evolution of a tree's bark forges this innate comprehension of materiality. Seeing the way glaciation shaped our topography, particularly where I live on the coast of Maine, is fundamental to knowing how we might more thoughtfully build on the earth. This one's beautifully illustrated, and it has a clear writing style. The next category I've termed narrative. Story is integral to the way we remember events, places, and it's the thing that colors our lives. These books remind us that it's the architect's duty to affect experience, to account for it, and to shape it. Thinking Architecture. A collection of short snippets, tiny essays, love letters almost about the human experience of architecture, explicitly showing how Zumthor thinks about design and space. This is an accessible, quick read I find myself coming back to again and again. Next is In Praise of Shadows. More of an essay than a book, it's a study in contrasts of not only Japanese architecture, but more generally the Eastern arts and the cultural differences with the West and modern culture. The idea of aged and patinated surfaces versus the shiny, perfect new is one I return to when thinking about how buildings age. Next up, Condemned Building. invented architecture and the stories that created them, supported by models and richly detailed graphite drawings. Ghost. This is an alternate hands-on teaching model developed by the author, professor, and practitioner Brian McKay Lyons. This book chronicles the works built by this ad hoc Nova Scotian seaside academy. McKay Lyons has influenced my own work significantly. His work is humble, refined, and deeply rooted in place, as well as the tectonics of building. Next up, Architecture. In a dystopian near future, his architecture appears self-organizing, irrational, empty and prickly, and yet strangely seductive. Colored pencil on Strathmore paper, chipboard models, text, composition, light. His monograph, Architecture, is a personal favorite, but anything you can get your hands on will be soul-enriching. The drawings are so emotive, you're left wondering if civilization has been eviscerated, leaving only husks of buildings, or whether the human race has actually evolved to become the buildings. This is stunning, visually challenging work. Next up, Process and Making. I find the design process and rituals surrounding the processes of creation endlessly fascinating. So first here is Type Variant House. The book quietly narrates the design process that led to the finished home, and it's documented in intricate detail. You can appreciate the iterative nature of design as you leaf through the volume. Finished photos, composed alongside hundreds of tiny sketches, reveal the toil behind such seemingly simple details as a stone water table, for example. From the macro to the micro, I find myself returning to discover things I'd missed previously. Next up is Boundaries by Maya Lin. She likens her ideation process to laying an egg, beautifully expressive ideas and philosophies, and a unique working methodology. It's one of the few architecture books that incorporates writing as a part of her work. This is something I find myself doing more and more of during the early stages of design. Next, the work of Shim Sutcliffe. Similar to Charles and Ray Ames, their architecture is defined by the tectonics of making. They use humble materials and experiment at full scale to design the right connections, the perfect light fixture, or the most appropriate door handle. Nothing they touch seems left to chance. Everything is considered. Okay, next up, any of the Tom Kundig monographs. There's kinetics, hot rodding, details, connections, gizmos, and a deep respect for the physical and visual properties of materials. Kundig's sketches are raw. They seem to ooze with the internal thought processes that led to the final building. Now, Peter Zumthor's 5-volume monograph set is spare, but it's beautifully photographed work. Process, models, sketches abound. It's a lot to consume, and the sheer volume of it makes it easy to skim over any of the less resonant work. The format indulges a desire to peer more closely at his carefully wrought details. Here again, every connection is thoroughly designed and measured. Zumthor's work, as recounted in these books, is a continual source for surprise and delight, even though I've not visited a single one of his buildings. The next category is Machines and Architecture. A fetish, I suppose, and a product of the time when I attended architecture school, when deconstruction was a thing and I couldn't get enough of it. The first book here is Building Machines. The mechanistic forms of Neil Denari, Wes Jones, and others fill this pamphlet and synergize with a collection of essays that build on Corbusier's building as a machine for living ideology. Next is Instrumental Form. The graphics and formal language here are to die for. I find myself a little bit at odds with the real spatial implications of these forms, but I can't stop coveting them as objects. Okay, next, Gyroscopic Horizons, Neil Denari. Similar themes as Instrumental Form. His urban monastery was the impetus for my own Bachelor of Architecture 5th-year thesis. Ridiculous models, completely satisfying in every possible way. Okay, next, Morphosis. There's buildings and projects. There's all kinds of monographs. More uber crisp graphics and huge models in balsa and chipboard, along with detailed photos of each. It's easy to get lost in the level of detail and care invested in designing every last inch. In school, I wanted nothing more than to be on their model building team. And the last one in this category is Blast Furnaces by Bernd and Hilla Becher. This book is pure gold to me. I had a chance to see some of their original prints at the Tate Modern in London recently, and they brought me to my knees. That's how good they are. The Betchers documented humble structures like water towers, grain elevators, and other seemingly plain industrial architecture in a really austere, head-on portrait style that's often copied today, but uniquely their invention. As a photographer, there's so much to behold in the photographs, the prints, the composition, the lighting, the contrast. I mean, they're simply stunning. As an architect, it's a visual feast of connection details and a repository of forms to borrow for my own work. Okay, next is mechanics, connections, and details. A deep understanding of the way things work and how that's revealed rather than hidden is an important design motivator for me. So the first publication here, the detail publications. These are magazines, but I treat them kind of like books because they're on par with the costs of books, but also because their graphics are excellent source material. Detail and Contemporary Residential Architecture series, there's a number of these books. They're published by the same group as the detail magazines I just mentioned. These books are fantastic because they correlate the physical building with the detailed construction notes and drawings the architects used to achieve the result. Now, once you've practiced for any period of time, you know the real magic of architecture is being able to execute your ideas in built form. This requires a particular sequence, real materials, and a labor force comprised of both skilled and unskilled workers. How one details a building determines how successful it is at expressing the ideas you started with and how it performs over time in the weather and during use. Next is The Works, The Anatomy of a City, a systems book that illustrates how things work together. The graphical clarity of this book is beautiful. This also feeds the part of me that wants to know and understand the inner workings of every minute detail. Things like how New York City gets its drinking water and the objects, wires, and pipes hidden beneath the street. Coordinating these systems is not unlike putting a building together, which demands we plan for myriad concealed systems, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, structural, and we have to do it in a way that's both elegant and aesthetically pleasing. Next up, wood and wood joints. This is a peek into the wood building and joinery traditions of Northern Europe, China, and Japan. Wonderful photographs and line drawings. I look here for fresh ideas and new ways to connect things simply without fasteners. Okay, and then there's Architectural Graphic Standards. I have the abbreviated student version, and admittedly, this is an extremely dry book, but it covers everything from anthropomorphic design to common cabinetry dimensions with a similar, often excruciatingly granular level of detail. This isn't a book to fall in love with, but one to keep close by to verify technical details. I think the Steel Manual falls into a similar vein for me. Not particularly lovable, but necessary. Okay, next, Fundamentals and General. Form, Space, and Order. Part inspiration, part hand-drawn manifesto. This work by Francis Ching distills architecture to its formative principles, and it's illustrated with beauty and style. I'd be shocked if this book wasn't in every architect's library. It's remarkable, really, when you consider the depth and breadth of the subject of architecture that he's managed to capture our practice so succinctly. Okay, next is Architectural Graphics. It's another one by Frank Ching. My parents purchased this for me the day I visited the architecture school I knew I wanted to attend. Drawing and model making led me to this profession, so this one holds a special place on the shelf. Pair this with Building Construction Illustrated by Ching, and you'd have an excellent foundation to work from. It's just enough information, and it's lovingly presented in his signature drawing style. I usually find myself reaching for BCI before graphic standards because of this. Next is Programs and Manifestos on 20th Century Architecture. All the greats are represented here: Mies, Wright, Corbusier, Gropius, Luce, and Kahn. It's proof that communicating our ideas in prose is every bit as powerful and important as the visual syntax we rely on. Although many of these writings can be challenging to digest, I love their exuberance. They're bold, almost like battle cries. If you're feeling down, this is a good place to go for a pick-me-up. Next is the Lego Architecture Studio Companion book. It really is quite amazing. There's real architecture in here, along with a presentation of the fundamentals of design, exploring topics like making space, addressing context, sketching, and abstraction. Each one is presented by a different firm: SOM, Su Fujimoto, Safdie, Rex Architecture, and others. Now, you can't buy this as a standalone book. You'll get the Legos along with it, but honestly, who doesn't like Legos, especially all white ones with little clear plastic tray organizers? Next are David Macaulay's books on building, cathedral, castle, Macaulay's illustrations say as much as the text, and each narrates the depth of thought and story that goes into the making of architecture. I saw him speak years ago about his drawing process, where he said he imagines himself as a bird flitting about, searching for the right perspective on a building. And when he finds it, he closes his eyes and begins sketching what the bird sees. And this is an all ages, all abilities intro to architecture and a masterclass in drawing by hand. So those are a few of my favorites. And of course, this list can't by nature be exhaustive. There's so many more books out there than I have the budget to acquire. There's Koolhaas's SMLXL, Corbusier's Complete Works, Yes is More, the works of Ando, Alto, Rural Studio, Rick Joy, Glenn Murcutt, Cernan, Richard Serra, Phaidon's Atlas of Contemporary World Architecture. Books feed the intellect, and a studio full of books assures you'll be surrounded by ideas of many. The masters, your colleagues, architects, entrepreneurs, performers, and documentarians. So choose wisely. They're a great equalizer when it comes to education and at a fraction of the cost of architecture school. Please remember to hit the thumbs up if you found something useful here, and be sure to tell me in the comments what your architecture book essentials are. What did I miss? Thanks for watching. As always, cheers.